you would think that people are voting in their self-interest when they comes to election time, but in the book you mentioned that they really aren't voting in that direction. Like why is that happening?
That's right. So my book, The Myth of the Rational Voter, it's my first book, goes into this in a lot of detail. Here's the key thing to understand. If you go shopping and you buy a bunch of junk that you don't want and you pay for it, you get out of the store and you are worse off.
Yeah.
And this is a reason to not do that in the first place. And if you ever do buy stuff that it turns out you don't like, don't buy it again. Mm-hmm. You are the person that bears the consequences of bad decisions. You are the person that benefits from learning from your own folly. Does this mean that nobody ever makes a bad decision in markets? Of course not, but it does mean that it has basic functionality. On the other hand, when people vote, it's not like that. If you vote for really terrible stuff, what happens? The same thing that was going to happen anyway, because you're just one tiny person. What is your incentive to learn if something passes that you wanted and it devastates your country? Well, it's not like there's anything you personally can do. If you had voted differently, nothing would have changed. If you vote differently in the future, nothing will change. Because again, you're just one person. And so everybody in this country who said that Trump would crash the stock market, there weren't that many, but everybody who said he crashed the stock market lived through the same stock market crash as everybody who thought things would be fine. Mm-hmm. It really did. This is a case where, interestingly, of course, you did have the option of shorting the stock market. And if you acted on your vision of doom, then you are now fabulously rich.
Yep.
If you know anyone that did this, my congratulations to them. On the other hand, anybody who claimed they foresaw it but was not shorting the market, you didn't foresee anything. You were just being hyper and got lucky.
Yep. And hindsight is 2020, of course. So let's say what you're telling us is true, that if we build more housing, we can actually price out roads and parking and make those two problems go away. What are just people misunderstanding about this whole housing situation that would actually convince them to vote more rationally?
I mean, honestly, the biggest misunderstanding is denying that building a lot more housing would bring prices down a lot. There is actual research just asking people, what do you think would happen to prices if we build a lot more housing? And roughly speaking, US public opinion divides as follows. 1/3 says if you build a lot more housing, prices go up. 1/3 says if you build a lot more housing, prices go down. 1/3 says if you build a lot more housing, nothing happens to prices. If that's what you believe, then yeah, why do you want to build housing? So it's just like the most basic, fundamental, deep-seated economic illiteracy of just insisting there's no connection at all between supply and price.
Yeah.
So what can you tell people about that? It's like, come on, man. If you're running a lemonade stand and you can't sell your lemonade, what are you going to do? Cut the price. Why do you think housing is different? If you build a massive apartment complex and you can't rent half your units, what are you going to do? You're going to cut the price. This is not ideology. It's common sense.
Yeah.
And yet we're at a world where there is a whole ideology of being angry at markets and business and rich people to the point where you're just willing to deny obvious facts of supply and price are very closely connected in an intuitive way.
Yeah.
And the ideology is denying that. That is not ideology to affirm that. It is ideology to deny that. It's common sense to affirm it. So I think that's the really big one. Again, probably the other big one, as I said, is to accept that the net effect of density is positive, not in my eyes in particular. I'm a suburban person, but in the eyes of consumers, the net package of density, the value people attach to density is very positive. Actions speak louder than words. People could live in the middle of nowhere. Telework has made that super easy. We've even, for a lot of people, gotten rid of those big benefits for jobs. But still, hardly anyone wants to live out in rural areas where your housing costs will be rock bottom because it messes up your in-person opportunities so badly that people would rather pay 5 times the price to live around people that will clog the roads and park up the streets. And that's just fact. It's not my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, the millions of people living in Manhattan and dealing with all of that.
Yeah, it's funny because the classic Woody Allen New York City resident is like, oh, God, the city's terrible. Oh, no.
Why do you live there?
Sorry, what was that, David?
It's like, why do you even live there? if you
Yes.
are complaining
Oh,
all the
well, I
time about
couldn't stand live over in those other places, all of those rednecks, Neanderthals.
it. Yeah, yeah,
I remember when I was on the job market at Princeton, a bunch of my fellow students like, I couldn't possibly live in the South. Oh, for heaven forfend, there are animals down there. And it's like, look, you're not going to be living out in like the toothless part of West Virginia. You're going
yeah,
to be in the highly cosmopolitan part of those states where you would never even hear a Southern accent. So, like, why don't you stop looking in the mirror and complimenting your own incredible open-mindedness and realize that you are a giant bigot. And why don't you actually go there to a southern city and see what it's really like and realize that you don't know what you're talking about?
yeah, yeah. No, and cities are just disproportionately left leaning anyways, so it's not like they'll find any of these rednecks in these populated
Well,
cities.
it's important to remember that the political separation is nowhere near as strict as stereotypes make us imagine. So, like, Trump got like over what, like 35% of the vote in California.
Yeah,
And it's like living in California, you'd think that there's like no Republicans there. I mean,
yeah,
I'm from there and it's easy to just think that. And then you realize, look, it's like people like my dad and all his buddies.
yeah,
And like the
yeah,
fact that they live in California, despite hating all the politics of the state, is because they like the weather and it's where they're from and their friends are there. And like there isn't the strict separation that you might imagine, in fact.
yeah. It seems like the housing problem is disproportionately affecting young people.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
something like half of Americans that are below 30 are still living with their parents,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously
Crazy.
there's the older
Sounds a bit
people.
high, but let's run with it.
It's a little, it might be wrong, but it's
Yeah.
very, very high, like proportionally to everywhere else. But Scott Galloway talks about how these older people who have houses are building these regulation moats basically to keep themselves rich. So why would all of these people vote against themselves? Like we can't really make a convincing argument for them.
So that is a very common misperception. Again, we got public opinion data in. It is not true that this is an owners versus renters issue. Renters generally favor a lot of regulation too. Probably about not even much of a difference, if any difference.
Hmm.
I mean, what's going on? And then why would tenants favor regulation? Because they think regulation makes life better and solves problems. They have these crazy views about, first of all, denying that there's a connection between supply and price, and second of all, denying that on balance, the net package of all the good and bad of density is good, even though by their own actions they're trying to get density.
Yeah.
So, but then how would it be in the self-interest of current owners to go and deregulate? So for some, it is not in their interests, and we'll just be honest about that. But for a lot, it is. Why? First of all, if you're an owner but you want to upgrade, you don't want housing prices to be sky high. If you're in your starter home, yes, it's wonderful there's high regulation so it makes the sale price of your starter home sky high. But if you want to move to a better home, then in fact, on balance, you'd be better off if housing prices were cheap because you're trying to get more housing. And so you are a net loser from regulation, even if you're an owner, if you want to upgrade.
Yeah.
A second, if you want to subdivide or otherwise improve on your property, then regulation is bad for you because it's preventing you from making money off of your property. Really, in terms of self-interest, what you want is to be the only person in your city that's allowed to build anything he wants. Right? And then you sell out and you build a skyscraper.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So next best thing is if only your neighborhood had no regulation. That would be the next best thing. Then you sell out to a bunch of developers and you make a killing. If you could be in the one neighborhood in San Francisco that was unregulated, you would make tens of millions of dollars, maybe like $100 million
Yeah,
from
yeah.
like one stupid townhouse. All right. Now, then third point. If you have kids that you would like to live within 100 miles of you, you are losing in a very important regulation. Is basically either your kids are going to live far away from you if the prices are sky high, or they're going to keep living in your basement, which means they don't get married and don't give you grandkids. Right. Alternately, you could go and get a big home equity loan against the inflated value of your house and give it to your kid to let them make the down payment. Why not just have low prices if that's what it's going to be?
Yeah.
It is not in the interest of anyone who wants their kids to live close to have a lot of regulation. Instead, while even if your housing price will fall, but you have this offsetting gain of your kids living nearby because they can afford it. And if you are the kind of person that cares about your kids and wants to see them and wants to know your grandkids, then it totally makes sense self-interestedly to be in favor of a pile of deregulation.
Yeah, yeah.
But if
Do you
any of
see,
those three arguments don't apply, then
and
then the
it's not in
system
your
benefits you.
interest.
But
Yeah, yeah.
like we're down to a pretty small number of people actually.
Yeah, yeah. Do you see any downstream effects from this housing problem that is affecting young
Mhm.
people that
Oh
apart from
yeah.
housing prices?
Yep. So, I mean, I see almost nothing but downstream effects. So there's almost no issue this doesn't matter for. It matters for equality because renters are poorer than owners, and also because renters just really cannot lose from deregulation. So whereas owners at least can, not necessarily, but they can.
Hmm.
So there is some downside for owners in terms of capital value. So young people tend to be in that group of people that don't own homes and have lower incomes. So it's making inequality worse. It's making social mobility worse. It's making family formation worse because people either have to live in the middle of nowhere, or they live in a very small space, or they live in with their parents. All right. So there's that. And in the book, I go over a lot of other problems that don't immediately seem to be related to housing regulation, but actually they are very tightly related to housing regulation. It just requires that people just look in a mirror and just say, yeah, like most people are just really wrong about this. I used to be one of them. I'm not going to be one of them anymore. I'm going to go against my society.